Subscribe for more. I shall be in charge of both the house and the business. She just gets the dolls. Sebastian's voice was full with smug joy, which filled the lawyer's office. Our content filters have prohibited the text that was made. It seemed like my inheritance was the subject of some kind of complicated practical joke, which made the whole family burst out laughing. I was sitting there in my simple black dress, watching my brother get all the praise while everyone else ignored everything I had worked for over the past 10 years. I'm Anna Wells, and I'm 32 years old. Timber Brewing, our family's construction company in Portland, Oregon, has been my job for the past 10 years. While I was working 80 hours a week, negotiating contracts, dealing with suppliers, and making sure our staff got paid on time, Sebastian was traveling the world at his father's cost, first as an undergrad and later in his 30s. But it seems that none of that mattered to the people who worked in this office with mahogany paneling. Anna was always Daddy's little princess, with her dollhouse collection, my Aunt Patricia said, taking a tissue out of her pocket and dabbing at her eyes. She didn't have a single tear in them. At the very least, Sebastian knows a lot about business. I bit my tongue pretty hard, and it made me taste blood in my mouth. Sebastian, the man who had never been to a building site, didn't know the difference between a 2x4 and a steel beam, and thought that profit margins were something you put in the margins of a notebook, didn't know anything about business. I kept my face blank and my hands in my lap. I knew that trying to explain myself to this family was like trying to argue with a pack of wolves. Well, Sebastian responded as he worked on changing his tie, which cost a lot of money. I don't mind Anna playing with her toys while I perform the important work, as long as she keeps doing it. Strong leadership was necessary for the company, Father would often say. Mr. Harrison, who is a lawyer, quietly cleared his throat. He was an old man who our family had known for a long time, and his eyes were full of compassion. I sat up taller because I saw something in his eyes that made me feel a flash of excitement that made my chest clench. Mr. Harrison made a statement that pierced through the laughing of the people around him like a scalpel through butter. The business was never registered in his name. The serenity that abruptly and fully enveloped the room was so strong that I could even hear the air moving through the vents. In the time it took for Sebastian's heart to beat, his face went from happy to confused. I could feel a warmth and danger coming from my chest, and it was getting bigger. I was sure that things would change in a way that none of them could have predicted. This confidence came after years of being ignored, overlooked, and seen as the family's biggest failure. Being the youngest child in the Wells family taught me early on that my thoughts and opinions didn't matter much. My father, Thomas Wells, was the one who started and grew his own construction company. He only had one truck and a few basic tools to start with. He was really tall. My mother Caroline died abruptly when I was 12, leaving me to figure out how to deal with the testosterone-heavy world of building sites and business meetings on my own. Everyone around Sebastian thought he had a bright future ahead of him because he was the golden child and 5 years older than everyone else. He played football in high school, dated the homecoming queen, and had ordinary grades in business school that everyone thought were great. When I was a teenager, I worked on construction projects. I learned about the differences between different types of concrete at that place, and I realized that foundation work is more important than fancy finishes. My father would tell guests, "Anna has a head for numbers," as if being able to do arithmetic was just a fun party trick and not an important skill in business. She makes sure I stay organized. But I am sure he recognized on a deeper level that it was more difficult than that. Sebastian finished from college and told me he was going to spend a year traveling throughout Europe, backpacking his way around the continent in search of himself. I was the one who took the lead. I was the one who fixed the relationship when our biggest client, who was in charge of $1 million contract, said they would stop it due to communication problems. I created a new set of employee benefits and was able to convince them to stay with the company even though we were about to lose 3 of our best employees to a rival. I had learned how to read architectural blueprints, understand zoning laws, and work with union leaders. I can travel to any of our project sites and find any safety, quality, or scheduling issues in only a few minutes. Sebastian, on the other hand, has only been to 2 building sites in his whole life. He had complained about the filth on his shoes both times. My father would say at family gatherings, "Sebastian will take over when I retire," and everyone would nod their heads in agreement. Wells has the ability to be an excellent leader. Where I saw laziness hidden by charm, they saw leadership. He was great at schmoozing clients at fancy dinner parties, but he couldn't read a contract if his life depended on it. He spoke with confidence when he talked about things like synergy and market positioning. He also acted like he belonged in a suit. But he didn't know anything about how much it really costs to pour a foundation or build a house. I kept working even though this was the case. I kept making ties with our suppliers and subcontractors while also working hard to solve problems and find ways around them. I clearly remember promising myself that one day my hard work would be recognized and that my family would understand how much I had given up for the company we all said we cared about so much. I have just now come to terms with the fact that my father knew everything that was going on the whole time. He knew that long before I did. In fact, he knew it even before we were all sat in that lawyer's office, with everyone else staring at Mr. Harrison in shocked silence. The question was whether or not he had done anything to cope with the situation. My dad died one night, and 3 months later, something happened in the lawyer's office. I was the one who held his hand when we were in the hospital room. The conference Sebastian went to in Miami was probably more of a vacation than a work trip. The funeral arrangements were already made when he got back from his flight. One of the times my father was aware of what was going on in those last few days, he told me, "You have been my right hand all these years. You know more about this business than anyone else." I took his hand and told him again that he didn't need to worry about his work and that everything will be fine in the end. His eyes showed that he really wanted to speak more, since they had a serious look on them. His briefcase was constantly in the corner of the room and never left his side during business hours. He continued looking at it. His voice was so low that I could barely understand what he was saying, so I had to lean in closer to hear him. He had whispered, "Anna. The dolls that were part of your grandmother's collection," I said. "There are other things to think about in this situation besides feelings." At the time, I believed he was talking about how important the old things were to him emotionally. The doll collection that my grandmother had owned had been passed down through the family. I always thought the dolls were a little scary, but I recognized how important the collection was from a historical point of view. Some of them were made by craftsmen in the 1800s, and their work was becoming less common. They were great examples of craftsmanship. But as I watched Mr. Harrison methodically sift through his documents, I started to wonder whether there was anything in what my father said that I didn't understand. Sebastian said, "I don't get what you mean when you say it was never in his name." His voice cracked a little as he said that the company was clearly his. Here is a quote. Mr. Harrison took out a big folder and changed his glasses a little bit. "Your father gave Anna management of Timbermere Brewing 5 years ago, and she has been in charge ever since. Since then, she has become the legal owner of the company, but Mr. Wells asked that the change be kept a secret." Even though my heart was racing against my ribcage, I made sure to keep a pretty neutral look on my face the whole time. It seemed like the air in the room had gotten heavier. Sebastian decided to go to Thailand for 6 months to learn more about his spiritual side. 5 years ago, he did this. At that time, I was working on the biggest deal our company had ever had. Sebastian said, "That isn't possible." But his voice didn't show that he really believed what he was saying. "This is who I am, his son. People think I will take over the business." Even though the tension in the room was growing, Mr. Harrison maintained calm and arched an eyebrow. He went on calmly, saying, "The will you are receiving as an inheritance today is connected to Mr. Wells's personal assets. These include numerous family heirlooms, his own investments, and the house Anna has owned since 2019. I let out a little smile, but I quickly hid it again. I could see the family members looking at each other with confused looks. The excitement they had shown before now turned into worry. It was the first time I had ever seen Sebastian look at me with what may have been respect in his eyes. He looked like he had just become an adult for the first time. His face had gone pallid. Fear could also have played a role. Sebastian exclaimed, "There is no way this can be right," and his voice shook because he was so desperate. Anna doesn't know how to run a business when it comes to managing one. That's all she is, the bookkeeper. The words hit me like a punch, but instead of making me angry, they made me feel cold and calculating in my chest. After being ignored for 10 years and only being known as the bookkeeper, the time had finally come. I saw Sebastian's expression go from astonishment to anger to rising panic as he finally realized what was going on. Mr. Harrison's legal document was so thick that it could be used to hold a door open. He then added, "I promise you there is no mistake here. Miss Wells has owned and run Timbermere Brewing since September 15, 2019. She is the lone owner. Your father made this move to keep the company safe from any potential creditors and to make sure that management with experience would keep running the business." Even though I hadn't said them out loud yet, the words "experienced management" tasted great on my mouth. For years, I've had to put up with Sebastian talking over me in meetings, taking credit for projects I managed from start to finish, and giving me condescending explanations of business basics that I already knew before he learned how to balance a checkbook. Sebastian objected, saying that his degree was more important than my 10 years of real-world experience, as if his degree was more important than my 10 years of real-world experience. I went to business school, though. I hadn't said a word since Mr. Harrison dropped his bombshell. After that, I said softly, "I got my MBA from Portland State University with a 2.8 GPA. You finished the program after 5 years because you kept taking breaks to figure out who you were." Everyone in the family looked at me when I did something that was really unusual. When my cousin Jake spilled the cup of coffee he was carrying, my Aunt Patricia opened her mouth. When the cup hit the floor, it made a loud noise, but no one got up. "Anna," my stepmother Diane yelled in a severe voice. "You should not talk to your brother like this." "I would have to agree with what you are saying," I said as I got up from my chair. It had been a long time since I had gotten up from that chair when we initially started to work. I know it would be smart for me to call him by his official title when I talk to him. "Sebastian, I would like to formally thank you on behalf of Timbermere Brewing for the many years you have done so little to help our organization succeed." I saw that Sebastian's hands were shaking as he tried to understand what I was saying. The golden child, who had always gotten everything, was finally facing a reality where his charm and connections couldn't save him anymore. "This is crazy," he said. But his voice didn't seem as sure of itself as it usually does. "Father would never do something like that." I told him that I was going to take over, I said to correct myself. "We talked about it all the time. You were the first one to bring it up." I changed something. He paid serious attention to what was being stated while he was listening. "There is a difference between the two things." Mr. Harrison tried to stop himself from coughing to ease the scratchiness in his throat. "Perhaps I ought to go into a complete explanation of the business transfer. Miss Wells, your father was very careful about the documents he kept. Do you think it would be better if I kept reading?" "The source says the following." I nodded in agreement and sat back down in my chair. I felt like I was precisely where I was intended to be for the first time in a long time. My family sat around me in shock, not saying a word. They had forgotten how happy they had been before and were trying to figure out how wrong they had been about the scenario. Mr. Harrison said, "The transfer included all intellectual property, all contracts, all business assets, and all equipment. Miss Wells has also been in charge of all of the company's debts and commitments for the previous 5 years, which she took on herself. The company is now valued almost 40% more than it was when she took it." A sound that brought to mind choking erupted from the body of Sebastian. I looked at him and saw that his face had changed from pale to greenish around the edges. He didn't get the 40% growth by chance or luck. He had never taken the time to realize that it was the consequence of his careful preparation, investments made with deliberation, and long days that stretched 18 hours each. Mr. Harrison observed, "Now, shall we proceed with the distribution of the personal estate?" The following is a quote. "The experience of browsing through the personal estate was like witnessing the events of a car accident take place in slow motion." Sebastian got the family home. It seemed like a great deal until Mr. Harrison revealed that there was an unpaid mortgage payment of $300,000. He also got all of the money that my father had stored up over the years. Over the past few years, a lot of these had been used up to help Sebastian with his businesses and pay for vacations that were longer than usual. Mr. Harrison said that Anna owns the antique doll collection and all of the appraisals and paperwork that go with it. Sebastian made a sound that sounded more like a bark than a real laugh, but it could only be called a chuckle. Look, I told you she was the one who got the dolls. At least a few things make sense. I was shaking with excitement on the inside, but I kept my face neutral. I was starting to understand what my father meant when he said that the dolls weren't just a sentimental gesture. He had talked about paperwork and appraisals in the days before he died, but those words didn't seem important at the time. Mr. Harrison, I asked carefully, could you tell me more about the appraisals? Here is a quote. When the senior attorney smirked, I saw a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. There is no doubt about that. There are 47 things in your grandmother's collection. This contains a full set of early Madame Alexander antiques and a few very rare Jumeau dolls from the 1870s. According to the most recent appraisal, which was finished last year, the collection is worth $512,000. The quiet was so complete that I could almost hear someone's stomach rumbling. I looked back at Sebastian, who had stopped laughing without warning. His face looked like someone who had just realized that he had been playing chess while everyone else had been playing checkers. Aunt Patricia whispered out loud, is it true that the amount is $500,000? For dolls? Here is a quote. Mr. Harrison says that antique dolls are expensive to buy and require a lot of money. The collection, which started in the 1920s when Miss Wells' great-grandmother made it, has grown over the years with donations of carefully chosen antiques from each new generation. Your father was quite proud of Anna's grasp of the collection's history and significance. I was the family member that listened to my grandmother's stories about each doll, helped her find out where they came from, and helped her keep them in good shape. I was learning about craftsmanship, history, and the value of things on the market, while Sebastian rolled his eyes and made jokes about scary old toys. Okay, let me make sure I understand this, Sebastian said in a calm and measured voice. His voice had a clear stress in it that showed how scared he was. Anna gets a business worth millions of dollars and $500,000 in antiques, and I get a house with a huge mortgage? Diane replied softly, you will also get father's truck, as if a pickup truck that was 10 years old might somehow balance the scales. The Timbermere Brewing Company, Mr. Harrison said, looking over his papers. It was thought to be worth $2,300,000, just like it was the month before. Miss Wells has been the majority owner of the company for the past 5 years. During that time, she has also been in charge of the company's finances, operations, and long-term planning. I observed as Sebastian thought about how to solve the problem. As he made the shift, his expression went from one of revelation to one of defeat. $2.3 million for the business, $500,000 more for the dolls, and the satisfaction of finally being recognized for the job I've done. At the same time, he was thinking about buying a house that he wouldn't be able to afford the upkeep on and a pickup truck that required a new transmission. He yelled in a panicked voice, there is no way this could be legal. We really need to make a plan. After I got back on my feet, I brushed off my skirt and said, the truth is that Anna somehow got the better of him. I think it's time for me to tell you exactly how this happened. 5 years ago, I started to relish the notion that everyone was pushing themselves forward against their own choice. While I was in charge of the Patterson Heights development project, Sebastian went to Thailand to look for his spiritual core. You still remember that one, don't you, Sebastian? The deal, which was valued $20 million, almost fell through because of problems with the licenses. Sebastian hurriedly scanned the room with his eyes, looking for help that wasn't there. The Patterson Heights project was a huge success for our organization, and it was a win that everyone will remember. I went on to say, I spent 3 months working with environmental consultants, zoning committees, and city planners to fix problems that could have put us out of business. While I was doing that, our lawyer found out that one of our subcontractors was getting ready to sue us, which could have put us out of business. Mr. Harrison nodded. The potential personal liability your father was facing could have affected his personal assets, like the family home. I remember that talk like it was yesterday, I said, so he called me into his office. He said he had been watching me as I dealt with responsibilities that were getting harder and harder, and that he wanted to protect both the business and the family. The answer was to give ownership to someone who really understood how the business worked. Why didn't he tell us, though? Diane asked, what is going on here? Her voice didn't seem as harsh as it had before. I said it because he knew you would react that way. Just like how you are reacting right now, not believing that Anna could handle anything more complicated than a lemonade stand. After a while, Sebastian was able to speak again. You can't suddenly give up control of a firm worth millions of dollars without talking to your family beforehand. That would be crazy. He didn't give it away, I said. After a long time, I finally let a little bit of sternness into my voice. I worked hard to get that. I not only made connections with our clients and suppliers, but I also dealt with every crisis that came up during the 18-hour workday. I made sure that our people would have jobs to go back to while you were posting pictures of beach resorts on Instagram. I didn't think I would need my own folder, which I had taken with me, so I took it out. During my time in charge, the company has grown, as shown by financial records that go back 5 years. I have statements from customers, suppliers, and employees. I have records of all the big decisions I've made and all the problems I've solved. Mr. Harrison looked like he was shocked. I knew you were very thorough because my father told me so, but I had no idea you had made records that were this complete. Looking at Sebastian with a serious look, I said, I discovered out early on that in this family, you have to keep account of everything if you want people to believe that you really did it. I saw other people take credit for my work way too many times. The room got quiet again, but this time it seemed weird. This was the uncomfortable hush that filled the room as people started to realize that they had made a big mistake over something important. People weren't shocked by the news. It wasn't the kind of shocked quiet that happens when something comes out of the blue. Sebastian asked the inquiry in a whisper that was almost loud enough to hear. What will happen next? I switched my attention to my brother, who had rode the waves of charm and family ties for 37 years. He had never once questioned the notion that he was entitled to inherit all of our father's achievements. For a second, I nearly felt sorry for him. From now on, I said to him, you need to learn how to get by on your own, just like I did. I was ready to leave the job where I had just officially become one of the richest young ladies in Portland. I picked up my papers and stood up. Before I left the room, I looked around one more time. Oh, and Sebastian, the business isn't hiring any new people right now. The things that happened after the will was read were exactly what I thought they would be. They were much better than I thought they would be. Sebastian looked like he had just been hit by a freight train when he left Mr. Harrison's office. He was obviously in astonishment. In the meantime, Aunt Patricia and Diane were yelling at each other in the hallway about how ungrateful kids are and how unfair surprises can be. I walked past them all with my head held high, holding the folder that had 5 years' worth of proof proving I had earned every penny of my inheritance. Please wait, Anna. As soon as I stepped into the elevator, I heard Sebastian shout out to me. He didn't sound as self-important as he used to when he spoke. It had been replaced by something that sounded almost like hopelessness. I told myself, we need to talk about this. His costly suit, which I had thought was so stylish, suddenly looked very worn out to me, and his hair, which was usually so beautiful, looked like a mess. As I turned around to face him, this is what I saw. Sebastian, what do you want to talk about? It's amazing that you never once asked me about my work. You never thought about it, but you thought you had the right to take over a business. How did you get to this decision? For example, you just spent the last hour saying bad things about my IQ in front of everyone in our family. Here is a straight quotation from this source. He opened his lips like he was going to say something, but then he closed it again without saying a word. It looked like he had come to the conclusion that no matter what he said, it would only make his situation worse. Do you know what the hilarious thing is about this? I kept talking as I walked to the elevator and got in. I have been more than glad to work with you, I am telling the truth. If you had shown even a little respect for the work I do or taken 5 minutes to learn about the business, we could have been partners. On the other hand, you were so focused on the idea of having everything handed to you on a silver platter that you forgot that someone else was doing all the work. When the elevator doors were about to close, I raised my hand to stop Sebastian from following me, but he didn't try very hard to keep up with me. Don't do that, I stated sternly. You settled this problem a long time ago. You completely ignore me, acting like I don't exist and that my contributions don't matter. At this point, you need to learn how to deal with the results. I could see a reflection of Sebastian in the shiny doors of the elevator as it went down. He was standing alone in the hallway. Everyone around him was a family member who looked at him with a mix of pity and disappointment, the same mix they had used to look at me before. I was in the office of Timbermere Brewing's headquarters, which had just been redecorated. After 3 weeks, I looked at plans for expansion that would have been hard to carry out under Sebastian's leadership. Every time I looked at the nameplate on my desk that said Owner and Chief Executive Officer, I felt a little thrill of excitement. It was my assistants who knocked on the door. Miss Wells, there is someone here named Sebastian Wells who wants to see you. He says he is your brother. I happened to look up from a conference table that had an architectural layout spread across its length. From the window of my office, I could see our latest construction site. We were building a sustainable housing development that would be featured in the upcoming edition of the Portland Business Journal. I was solely responsible for the project, as it was my design and my vision. I told them to send him in. Sebastian came into my office looking like he hadn't slept well in weeks. He stood like someone who had run out of alternatives, and his clothing were crumpled and his hair was messy. He said something positive about the office, but the way he said it didn't sound like he meant it. I thought your company was going to get into the green building business. We are, I answered, not getting up or offering him a chair. We're in a good position to become regional leaders in sustainable building practices because this market is growing. He slowly nodded as he flew around the world, taking in all the prizes on my walls, the pictures of the projects I had finished, and the architectural qualifications I had received. After a long delay, he eventually said, I need a job, and called her by the name Anna. I knew what was going on between us, and I had been waiting for this time on a subconscious level. I was aware of this. Sebastian Wells, the golden child who had never kept a job in his life, was asking his younger sister for work. I said I was sorry, and I meant it. I really felt horrible at the moment. However, we are not currently in the process of hiring. After the reading of the will, the word of the abrupt change of fortune at Timbermere Brewing spread throughout Portland's business community, and at that point, the life of Sebastian started to disintegrate very quickly. His reputation as a potential business leader was irreparably damaged as soon as people became aware of the fact that he had anticipated inheriting a company that his sister had actually been operating for many years. The fact that he did not have any real-world experience became glaringly obvious to him when he made an attempt to get a job at development or construction companies that were acquainted with the Wells family's history. He took a job as a sales assistant at a car dealership while he fought to pay off the mortgage on a property that he could not afford to maintain. He was unable to handle the financial load of the family house, which is what led to his predicament. In the period of 6 months, Sebastian was left with no other option but to relocate to a humble apartment and watch from a distance while his sister expanded the business that he had previously taken for granted. The reality that he had spent years disregarding her contributions and that he had lost everything that he had expected to inherit as a result of those actions was something of which he was fully aware. I reflected on the fact that the years of contempt I received from Sebastian had inadvertently prepared me for this moment as I signed the contract for our 4th major expansion project. I was obligated to maintain a record of every success I achieved, show every argument, and develop the type of comprehensive track record that made my ownership indisputable the moment when the truth was finally disclosed due to his constant disrespect of my ability. Instructing me in the fact that at times, the most gratifying kind of revenge is to simply allow other people to discover on their own that the person who they underestimated was actually in charge all along. As I was sitting in my office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as I witnessed the company flourish and expand under my leadership. Timbermere Brewing's success and the bequest, which seemed to be unattainable only a few months earlier, were not the only factors that were taken into consideration. It was a matter of proving to myself and to everyone else that I was capable of doing more than just working as an accountant. I was an entity that no one would dare to meddle with. Sebastian brought about his own demise through his hubris and the belief that he was entitled to everything without exerting effort. Concurrently, I was diligently working on a project that would ultimately surpass all expectations. In the end, this proved to be the most significant triumph of all. I now find myself at the peak, ready to create my own road and to continue to build upon this legacy. What can you tell me about him then? Ultimately, all that remains for him to do is to piece together the fragments of a life that he had once been under the impression had been handed to him without any effort on his part. In the meantime, I elevate Timbermere Brewing to levels that have never been achieved before, proving that sometimes the most effective form of retribution is simply attaining success when someone else has thought that you would be unsuccessful. If you would like to see further videos like this one, which include topics such as real-life twists, family conflict, and success in the face of adversity, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. By tapping on the bell icon, you can be certain that you never miss an update about the newest videos I have released. Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below, as I would be absolutely thrilled to know what you think about how Anna handled the betrayal committed by her family and what you would do if you were in her place. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. Please remember that you should never let anyone stop you from following your path.